So a suffragette, a vampire and the goddess of thunder walk into a bar. There's no punchline, this is just my October wrap up. I kind of really want to go to a bar with those people. The first thing that I wanted to mention was volume 1 of Miss Marvel called No Normal. This was written by G. Willow Wilson and the art is by Adrian Alfona. I actually finished this in September but didn't get a chance to talk about it in my wrap up. I finished it just after filming, I think. All I have to say about this for now is that if you're a fan of comics and you're a fan of Marvel, you need to pick this up if you haven't already. Kamala Khan is such an amazing character, she's so relatable. She's a huge fan of the Avengers, she writes fan fiction for them, and she's a teenage girl struggling with trying to find her own path in life and trying to reconcile that path with the path that her parents wanted to take and the path that American society seems to expect her to take. And on top of all that, she's also now a superhero as well. So she has to deal with all of the fun things that come with that. It's a lot of fun and I really can't wait to pick up the next couple of volumes because I will definitely be continuing on with this and I'll definitely be I will definitely be following Kamala's story. And I am planning on doing a full review of this because I think it's just so important and my mum is calling me. I was going to film a whole review of this and I still am going to, but when I started writing down all my thoughts and feelings I realised that I had way more than I expected, so I'm trying to put them all together coherently and I will probably try to put that review up by the end of the year. I really want to talk about it and spread the love for it. If you hadn't guessed already, I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. This has probably been the strangest month in terms of the mix of things that I read. I read 2 novels, 1 memoir, 1 novella, 3 comics/graphic novels, whatever you want to call them, 1 short story and 1 collection of poetry. So I'm pretty sure it's also been the month where I've given the most 5 stars to the books that I've read. Unfortunately, I didn't give 5 stars to all of the books that I read, which is the case for this first one. It is You by Caroline Kepnes. This is about Joe, who is a stalker who becomes obsessed with a woman called Beck after she buys a book from him from his bookshop. It's told in the second person, so it sounds as though he's talking directly to you, the reader, but he's also addressing Beck as the person that he's talking to. Now, I actually did find that very interesting because you're kind of getting put in the place of both characters. You're in the mindset of Joe because it's obviously his point of view, but you also sort of feel like you are Beck in some places. The fact that Beck is a reader will blur the line between most of the readers of the book and the character herself. A lot of the time it felt as though what Joe was saying could apply to me directly, and I think that's where the discomfort came from. Obviously the things that Joe thinks are problematic and Beck is either on a pedestal or she is the dirt beneath his feet, and I didn't like being put in a place where he was talking to me like that. It just really did not like. Obviously this is a book about a man who stalks a woman, so it was going to be problematic and that was the intention of the author. I think that it just works a little bit too well. It started to make me feel bad about myself, even though I knew that Joe was addressing a fictional character who wasn't me. I kept on reading, I didn't DNF it, so that says something about it. I really did want to see where the story was going, but I won't be continuing with the sequel. It's just not for me. It made me feel really paranoid, which I am already, and I already have trust issues, so I didn't need that in my life really. And on top of all of that, I really liked the run-on sentence style that Joe has in the beginning, but after about 50 pages it just started to really wind me up. I just felt like it was really overused. Joe is a character that I really dislike as well. I didn't find him funny and I really didn't enjoy being in his mind. It was just a horrible place to be. I just found him to be so bitter and judgmental and a disgusting human being. So I gave this 1 out of 5 stars. A lot of people enjoy it, but I'm not one of those people. And when it comes to likeable criminals, I'm going to stick with Dexter. Thank you very much. The next thing that I finished was Suffragette, My Own Story by Emmeline Pankhurst. I get to be a little bit more positive now. So this is Emmeline Pankhurst's memoir, and it focuses on her time as one of the leaders of the suffragette movement. And I'm going to put this down because it's making the light strange, and the light is already fading anyway because it's 3 o'clock in November in England. So Emmeline Pankhurst fought literally sometimes for women to be able to vote. I heard about the film coming out and I wanted to read some more about the suffragette movement because it is a movement that I've always been very interested in but haven't really explored further than what we learn in history lessons, which I found out doesn't really give you the full picture. I realised as I started to read that I'd never heard the story from the women's point of view. I'd never heard the side of the suffragettes, and it really brought into perspective how hard and long they fought for this. Reading this shows the processes that these women went through. It shows that they tried peaceful methods and it wasn't working, so they used things that men had done in the past to protest and to get rights for themselves. It can get a bit repetitive at times, but that's really because that's how it happened. They campaigned and campaigned and campaigned, and they were given promises by the government that eventually they would get more rights and they would work towards introducing the vote for women. But again and again they were just given these ridiculous excuses, increasingly ridiculous excuses, as to why they couldn't get the vote. And it actually became quite funny because it was like, really guys, that's the excuse you're giving? And when I say it's funny, I mean it's funny in a really frustrating way. And then it gets sickening as things like the Cat and Mouse Act started to happen, where women were force-fed, which I knew had happened, but I didn't fully understand how violent the procedure was and how dangerous it was. What I'm taking away with this book is just a more complete picture of the movement and its place in history. It's very interesting to now have sort of more pieces of the puzzle connected, but I feel like there's a lot more to it as well. That's part of the reason why I really want to go and see the film, because even though it's obviously a fictionalised account, it takes the perspective of the working class woman. This memoir is obviously from Emmeline Pankhurst's experience, but she's a very well-off woman. I gave this memoir a 5 out of 5 stars. And now I feel like singing that song from Mary Poppins. Next, I got into the Halloween spirit by reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I've already talked about this in another video, so I'll link to that and you can go and watch it if you're interested in my thoughts on it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. After that, I finished Her Book by Jo Shapcott. These are a collection of her poems from 1988 to 1998. I'm probably going to end up reading all of Jo Shapcott's poetry because I just really enjoy it. I should probably branch out a little bit, but so far, just gonna go with good old Jo. Something that I really enjoyed about this was that a lot of the poems were related to life in London, but my favourite poem was Thetis. This is about a sea goddess who can change her shape to anything that she wants, but one day Proteus captures her and binds her and she can no longer change shape. I thought it was a really powerful poem and I will link to that one as well. I gave this collection a 4 out of 5 stars. I then spontaneously decided to join in with Dewey's 24-hour readathon, and I started with The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. Again, I've talked about this one in another video, so I'll link to that. It's a short story about a governess who is put in charge of these 2 very angelic children. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about this one too much again, but there is one thing that I forgot to mention in the other video, and that is that there are so many different interpretations of this story that you could take away from it that I feel like it's going to be a really good one to go back to again and again, because you kind of feel like there's something else going on below the surface that you're not being told. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. It was probably my favourite read of the month because I just want to talk about it forever. It's just such a good story. I then decided to read Age of Ultron by Brian Michael Bendis. If you can't see, that is Ultron holding Captain America up by his face. First of all, it is very different from the film. and I liked it a lot more than the film because I didn't really enjoy the second Avengers film and I was really quite disappointed with it, but that's a different review. The basic premise is the same. It's a Frankenstein story where a scientist creates a new life form. In this case it's Ultron, and in the comics case Ultron has taken over the world. So if you really like post-apocalyptic slash dystopian world, I think you'd really enjoy this one. All your favourite superheroes are either in hiding or dead. The ones that are remaining have to figure out a way to stop Ultron. It starts off with a really epic rescue scene with Hawkeye, so that probably sold me on it straight away. It's really not looking good for the good guys. There is this one part of it where somebody asks where Captain America is, and then it shows you a panel of him just like with his head in his hands and he's just lost all hope, and it was like, feelings. I was really pleasantly surprised by this. It's the first time that I've read a comic where it was a team rather than an individual character. I'd kind of been putting that off for some reason. I also gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. And if anyone has a recommendation of what to read after that for the Avengers, let me know, because I really don't know what to read next. Although don't recommend Civil War because I want to wait until the film comes out and then I'm going to read Civil War after that. And continuing with the superhero theme, I then picked up Thor, Goddess of Thunder Volume 1. This was written by Jason Aaron and the art was by Russell Dauterman. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Thor films are my least favourite. Not to say that I don't like them, because I do, I just like the other ones a lot more. So I wasn't expecting too much going into this, but I really loved it. I think I enjoyed it a lot more as a comic than I do as a film. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe because it was a little bit more fantasy and a little bit more magical than it comes across in the films. I feel like they could do a lot more in terms of special effects now that I've seen this as a comic. Anyway, so the feminist message of this is really obvious, but I have no problems with that because that's part of the reason why I like superhero stories, is that the messages are always pretty obvious and on the surface. I really liked the character of Thor. I thought she was really funny because she kind of has this inner monologue going on where she's thinking, what is going on? I don't understand how this is happening, but it's really cool and also really frightening. What? But then on the outside she's really cool and confident, and she's speaking in that weird Shakespearean way that the characters in Thor do. I also wanted to mention that I really liked the character of Malekith the Dark Elf, I think. Maybe it's the elf thing, but he really reminds me of Thranduil from The Hobbit. He has that kind of suave way about him that I just really like in a villain. And I also really liked his powers as well. He seems to have like really cool magic powers. Now, the whole way through this comic you're not supposed to know who this new Thor is, and that's the mystery, that's the thread that's running through the whole thing. That was the only flaw that I could see with this comic, is that I don't understand why it needs to be a mystery other than to keep the reader interested. Maybe it'll become more obvious when I pick up the next volume, because I will pick up the next volume. And before I end this review, I also wanted to say that the artwork is absolutely stunning. I can't show you it because I borrowed it from the library, but I'll leave a link to my Instagram account because I kind of spammed it a little bit with the art. And I gave this one another 5 out of 5 stars. And finally, the last thing that I read was Carmilla by Joseph Le Fanu. Wow, I've gone very in the shadows now. Again, I already talked about this one, so I'm not going to say much more. It is basically about a young girl who becomes the victim of a vampire attack. And I'm actually going to shout out to Elizabeth at Books and Pieces because she recently recommended this as part of her gothic fiction video, and she gives the best description of it ever. She says something like, Laura and Camilla become desperately, passionately just good friends. You should check out the whole description of that and the other books that she's recommended because I've added a lot of them to my list as well. And that's a wrap. Like I said, it's been a strange month for me. I don't usually read so many classics. Before now I really struggled to enjoy them, but I was loving them this month. I hope that I'm seeing a shift in my reading preferences because I think it just refreshes that passion for reading and for books. I feel like I should be singing A Whole New World from Aladdin. So what did you read in October? And which book stuck with you the most? Thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye! This is the reason why you shouldn't read 10 things in a month, because now my throat is killing me.